My fiancé announced, "I'm selling your comic book collection. They're just paper." First edition's worth $120,000, including Action Comics #1. I said, "Touch them and I'll prosecute." She sold them anyway. When the collector who bought them contacted me about authenticity and I involved the FBI for Interstate stolen property. I, 34 male, work as a data analyst for a health insurance company. Cubicle job. Decent pay. Nothing glamorous. I mention this because what I'm about to tell you involves a dollar amount that doesn't match what people expect from a guy who wears khakis to work and drives a 10-year-old Accord. But here we are. I collect comic books. Since I was 9 years old. My uncle, who never married, never had kids, worked as an electrician his whole life, and spent his disposable income on exactly two things. Fishing and comics. Started me on it. He'd bring me to conventions when I was a kid. Taught me about grades and conditions, and the difference between a reprint and a first printing. When he passed away 8 years ago, he left me his collection. Not the whole thing. He sold most of it over the years when he needed cash, but the crown jewels. The ones he'd been holding on to since the 1970s. The centerpiece was an Action Comics #1. 1938, the first appearance of Superman. Now before anyone loses their mind. No, it wasn't a pristine copy. It was a CGC graded 1.5. Incomplete back cover, significant wear, some pages detached. In the world of comic grading, a 1.5 is rough. But it's still an Action Comics #1. There are maybe 100 verified copies in existence. Even at a 1.5, the last comparable sale I tracked was around $85,000. The rest of the collection included a Detective Comics #27, First Batman, CGC 0.5, basically held together by prayers and a slab case, but still worth roughly $18,000. An Amazing Fantasy #15, First Spider-Man, CGC 3.0, worth about $12,000. And a handful of other golden and silver age keys that were collectively worth somewhere around $5,000 to $8,000. Total appraised value of the collection, certified by a recognized comic book appraisal service 18 months ago, $120,000. Give or take, depending on market fluctuations. These comics lived in a fireproof safe in my home office. A Liberty safe bolted to the floor. I had a separate rider on my homeowner's insurance, specifically for the collection. I had the appraisal documentation, the CGC certification papers, provenance records from my uncle's estate. Everything was cataloged in a spreadsheet with photos, grades, and estimated values. I am thorough to the point of being annoying about it. My uncle taught me that too. My fiancée and I had been together for 3 years, engaged for 5 months. She was an event coordinator for a hotel chain. Organized weddings, corporate retreats, that kind of thing. Very social, very polished, very much the kind of person who thought being practical meant eliminating anything that didn't serve an obvious functional purpose. She'd optimized her closet with one of those capsule wardrobe systems. Her kitchen had exactly the number of utensils she needed and not one more. She called it intentional living. I called it exhausting. She'd always been mildly contemptuous of my comics. Not aggressively. More like a persistent low-grade condescension. She'd walk past my office and see the safe and say things like, "There's that expensive filing cabinet again," or "Imagine how much closet space we'd have without a vault in the house." When I tried to explain what the collection was worth, she'd say, "On paper, sure," or "Only if someone's dumb enough to pay that." She genuinely did not believe comic books could be valuable. Not in an ignorant way, in a willful way. She decided they were silly, and no amount of evidence was going to change her mind, because changing her mind would mean admitting she'd been wrong. 5 weeks ago, we were doing wedding planning at the kitchen table. She had a whole binder, color-coded tabs. She was talking about upgrading the venue from the one we'd booked, $8,500, to a better one, $19,000, because her college roommate had gotten married there and it would be perfect for our aesthetic. I said we couldn't afford a $19,000 venue on our current budget. She said, "We can if you sell the comic books." I put my pen down. "No, they're just paper, old paper, sitting in a safe, doing nothing. They're worth $120,000, and they're not for sale." Exactly. They're worth $120,000. That means you're sitting on $120,000 doing nothing with it when we have a wedding to pay for. The wedding budget is what we agreed on. The comics are not part of the wedding budget. Why are you so attached to old magazines? They're not magazines, and I'm attached to them because my uncle left them to me and they're irreplaceable. Your uncle left you paper. I'm asking you to invest in our future. My answer is no. She did that thing she did when she was frustrated, closed her eyes, took a breath through her nose, and spoke very slowly like she was explaining something to a child. I'm going to sell those comic books. We need the money for the wedding, and you're being selfish keeping $120,000 locked in a safe for no reason. I looked at her. If you touch that collection, I will prosecute you for theft. I'm not joking. Those items are appraised, insured, and documented. They're my property, not ours. Mine. Inherited. If you sell them, it's theft, and I will treat it as such. She stared at me. You call the police on your own fiancé? Over paper? Over $120,000 worth of my property? Yes. She called me dramatic and went to bed. I should have moved the collection that night. I know that now, but I thought the conversation was clear enough. I thought, I will prosecute you was unambiguous. I thought the fireproof safe bolted to the floor was a sufficient deterrent. I was wrong about all three. 2 weeks later, I came home from work on a Thursday, and the safe was open. Not broken into, opened. She'd watched me enter the combination enough times to memorize it. The safe was empty. Every slab comic, every raw book, every CGC case. Gone. On the kitchen counter was a handwritten note, sold the comics. Got $4,200 for the lot. I deposited the money in my checking account, and it'll go toward the venue upgrade. You're welcome. You'll thank me later. $4,200 for $120,000 worth of comics. She'd sold them to some guy she found on a local marketplace app. Probably a dealer or a flipper who recognized immediately what he was looking at and offered her a fraction of the actual value, knowing she had no idea what she was holding. She'd handed over Action Comics #1, one of maybe 100 copies on Earth, for what averaged out to about $350 per book. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I sat at the kitchen counter and read the note 3 times. Then I picked up my phone and did 3 things in this order. Called a criminal defense attorney who'd been recommended to me by a coworker. Left a voicemail. Called the non-emergency police line and reported a theft of personal property valued at $120,000. Opened my appraisal documents on my laptop and started compiling every piece of evidence I had. She came home 2 hours later, smiling. Actually smiling. Like she'd done me a favor. Did you see the note? I saw it. So, isn't it great? One less thing to worry about. I called the police. The smile didn't disappear immediately. It sort of froze. Like her face was buffering. You called the police. I told you what happened. Over comic books. Over $120,000 in stolen property. Yes, I'm your fiancé. I can't steal from you. You absolutely can. And you did. I didn't steal anything. I sold some old papers and put the money toward our wedding. You sold my property without my consent. You deposited the money in your account. The legal term for that is theft. She started crying. Told me I was ruining everything. Told me I loved comic books more than I loved her. Told me no jury in America would convict a woman for selling her fiancé's magazine collection to pay for their wedding. She actually said that. Magazine collection. While crying. It was almost impressive how committed she was to the bit. I slept in my office that night. The empty safe was open, and I couldn't bring myself to close it. Update 1, 11 days later. Y'all, the buyer contacted me. Let me explain how this happened, because it's the pivot point of the entire story. When you buy a CGC-graded comic, especially a high-value Golden Age book, any serious collector or dealer will verify the provenance. CGC slabs have certification numbers. Those numbers are tied to a registry. The registry shows the grading history, the date of certification, and, crucially, the name of the account holder who submitted the book for grading. My uncle's name was on the original submissions. When he passed, and the collection transferred to me, I updated the CGC registry to reflect the new ownership. My name, my contact information. This is standard procedure for anyone who actually understands how the comic collecting world works. My fiancé did not understand how the comic collecting world works. The buyer, a serious collector based in another state, had purchased the lot for $4,200 from some woman on a marketplace app who described them as old comic books, probably worth something, just want them gone. He knew exactly what he was buying. He knew he was getting the deal of a lifetime. But he also knew that legitimate collectors verify provenance before flipping or insuring high-value books. So he ran the CGC numbers. My name came up. My phone number came up. He called me. "Sir, I recently purchased a collection that appears to be registered to you. I wanted to verify the chain of ownership. Those books were stolen from me by my fiancé, without my knowledge or consent." Dead silence. Then, "I paid $4,200 for this lot. The collection is appraised at $120,000. More silence. "I see. I've filed a police report. The case number is number. I have full documentation, appraisal, CGC registration, provenance records, insurance rider. Those books are legally my property." To his credit, the buyer was professional. He said he needed to consult with his own attorney and would be in touch. He wasn't happy. He just found out his incredible deal was potentially stolen property, but he was calm about it. Now here's where the FBI angle comes in, and I want to be precise because a lot of people think I'm exaggerating. The buyer lived in a different state from me. The transaction occurred through a marketplace app, and the books were shipped via USPS across state lines. When stolen property valued above a certain threshold crosses state lines, it can become a federal matter. Specifically, the National Stolen Property Act makes it a federal crime to transport stolen goods worth $5,000 or more across state lines. My collection was worth $120,000. It crossed state lines. I didn't call the FBI in the dramatic movie trailer sense. What happened was, my attorney contacted the local field office and filed a report. The FBI doesn't kick in doors over comic books, but they do open files, and they did assign an agent. And that agent did contact both the buyer and eventually my fiancée. When I told my fiancée that the FBI was involved, she did not take it well. "The FBI? Are you insane? You shipped stolen property worth $120,000 across state lines." "I didn't ship anything. I put them in a box and went to the post office." That's shipping. You know what I mean? I didn't think it was a federal crime to mail a package. It is when the package contains $120,000 in stolen property. Stop saying stolen. I'm your fiancé. It's not stealing. We are not married. We have no shared property agreement. Those comics were inherited by me, insured by me, and registered to me. You took them without my permission after I explicitly told you not to. That is legally theft. She called her mother. Of course, she called her mother. Her mother called me within the hour. This woman, who had once described my comic collection as that sad little hobby at a Thanksgiving dinner, launched into a monologue about how I was traumatizing her daughter, weaponizing the justice system, and acting like a spoiled child because someone threw away his toys. "Ma'am, your daughter stole $120,000 worth of my property. Oh, please. They're comic books. Comic books with a certified appraisal of $120,000, an insurance rider for the same amount, and CGC registration. This isn't opinion. It's documentation. You're going to send the mother of your children to prison over Batman? We don't have children. And it was Superman, primarily. You think you're funny? I think your daughter committed a felony. I don't find that funny at all." She called me every name she could think of and hung up. Then she called my mother, which, look, my mother is a retired dental hygienist who raised 3 boys by herself. She doesn't scare easy. She told my ex's mother. My son told her not to touch them. She touched them. That's the whole story. And hung up. Meanwhile, the buyer was cooperating. He'd spoken with his attorney and understood that if the books were confirmed stolen, he was in possession of stolen property regardless of whether he'd bought them in good faith. He agreed to hold the collection until the legal situation resolved, which was more cooperative than he needed to be. I think he realized the mess was bigger than him, and he just wanted out clean. My fiancée hired a lawyer. Not a good one. A guy her cousin recommended who mostly handled DUI cases. His first move was to argue that the comics were shared household property. because they were stored in a house where both of us lived. My attorney demolished that in about 2 paragraphs. The comics predated the relationship, were inherited property, were insured solely under my name, and were registered to me individually. No joint ownership had ever been established or implied. The DUI lawyer's second move was to argue that I had verbally authorized the sale by telling her the comics were worth $120,000. Apparently, in his legal theory, telling someone what something is worth is the same as giving them permission to sell it. My attorney didn't even dignify that with a formal response. He called it creative in the email, which in lawyer speak is basically laughing. The engagement was obviously over. I told her through my attorney that the relationship was terminated and that she needed to find alternative living arrangements. She refused to move out, claiming she was a resident and couldn't be kicked out. She was technically right about that. I'd have to go through a formal process. So I started that process. Her mother showed up at the house with empty boxes the next day, not to help her daughter move, to retrieve items of sentimental value before I changed the locks and kept everything. I told her through the door that she was welcome to take her daughter's belongings, but that I was documenting everything being removed and she was not to enter my office. She took 3 trips to her car. On the 3rd trip, she paused on the porch and said, "You could have just been a man about this and let it go." I said, "A man did let it go. My uncle left me that collection because he trusted me to protect it. I'm protecting it." She didn't have a response for that. Update 2, 4 weeks later. The legal wheels were turning, and they were turning ugly. For her. Let me break down the 3 major developments. The FBI agent assigned to the case, professional, methodical, about as emotional as a spreadsheet, conducted interviews with me, my ex-fiancée, and the buyer. The buyer fully cooperated and provided all transaction records, the marketplace listing, shipping confirmations, and his own statement. My ex-fiancée, against her DUI lawyer's advice, agreed to speak with the agent. I know this because my attorney got a summary. She told the FBI agent, the federal law enforcement officer investigating her for interstate transport of stolen property, that she didn't think comic books could be worth that much and that she was just trying to help plan a wedding. The agent asked her if I had told her the value. She said yes. The agent asked if I had told her not to sell them. She said yes. The agent asked why she did it anyway. She said, "Because they're just paper. It's not like I stole jewelry." My attorney said the agent's report noted her lack of appreciation for the severity of the situation. In federal agent language, that translates to, she thinks the rules don't apply to her. The U.S. Attorney's Office reviewed the case. They had a choice: pursue federal charges under the National Stolen Property Act or defer to the state for prosecution. Given the clear documentation, the interstate element, and the value of the property, they decided to pursue federal charges. My ex-fiancée was formally charged with interstate transportation of stolen property, a federal felony carrying up to 10 years in prison. 10 years. For just paper. Her DUI lawyer withdrew from the case because he was not qualified for federal defense work. She had to retain a federal criminal defense attorney. The retainer alone was $15,000. Her mother paid it. I know this because her mother called my mother to tell her that I was financially destroying her family. My mom said, "Your daughter financially destroyed his collection." Seems like cause and effect to me. My mom's a legend. With the FBI involved and the buyer cooperating, the collection was identified, cataloged, and held as evidence. All 12 books. I worked with the agent to verify each one against my registry and appraisal documents. Every CGC slab matched. Every certification number checked out. The Action Comics number 1 was intact in its case. Detective Comics number 27 was there. Amazing Fantasy number 15 was there. Everything. The buyer, as a good faith purchaser, was entitled to the return of his $4,200. That money had to come from somewhere, and legally, it was coming from my ex-fiancée. She'd received the payment, she owed the refund. Her attorney tried to argue that the $4,200 had already been spent on a venue upgrade deposit that was now non-refundable, because of course it was. The court didn't care. She owed the money. Her mother paid that too. Running total of what her mother was spending on this situation, $19,200 and climbing. Separately from the criminal case, my attorney filed a civil suit for damages. Not for the value of the comics. Those were being recovered. But for the cost of a new appraisal I'd need after the books were returned. Some had been stored improperly by the buyer and would need to be re-examined for condition changes, legal fees, the emotional distress of having irreplaceable inherited property stolen. And this was my attorney's idea, the difference between the appraised value and the sale price, to account for any potential devaluation caused by the broken chain of custody. She countersued. Her new federal defense attorney had a colleague handle the civil side, and they filed a counterclaim arguing I had entrapped her by keeping high-value items in a household safe with an easily observable combination, which constituted negligent safeguarding. Yes, she was arguing that it was my fault she stole from me because the safe wasn't hard enough to open. My attorney compared this to arguing that a bank robbery is the bank's fault for having a front door. The judge was not amused by her counterclaim. It was dismissed. Meanwhile, the entitlement kept flowing from the source. Her sister, who I'd met maybe 4 times total and who had the personality of a gas station wine cooler, sent me a 3-page email explaining how I was tearing apart 2 families over a hobby. She said their mother was having anxiety attacks, and their father, who'd been silent through all of this, was embarrassed to show his face at church. She concluded with, "Just drop the charges and move on. Be the bigger person." I forwarded the email to my attorney without comment. He replied, "I'll add it to the file in case we need to demonstrate the pattern of pressure to drop charges." Her father finally called me. First time he'd ever called me directly. He was quiet for a moment and then said, "I'm not going to tell you you're wrong, but I'm asking you if there's any room to negotiate." Sir, she was told not to do it. She did it. She was told there would be consequences. There are consequences. I don't know what room there is. She's my daughter, and those comics were my uncle's. He trusted me with them. Long pause. I understand. He hung up. I felt bad about that one. Her father never did anything wrong, but I wasn't the one who put him in that position. Update 3. Final, 7 weeks later. Here's how it ended. Or more accurately, here's where it stopped escalating and started settling into the permanent shape of consequences. The federal case. Her defense attorney, once he had the full picture, her own admission to the FBI that she knew the value, knew I'd said no, and did it anyway, advised her to take a plea deal. The U.S. Attorney's Office offered one. Plead guilty to a reduced charge of interstate transportation of stolen property, accept 2 years of federal probation, pay full restitution, and complete 200 hours of community service. No prison time. She didn't want to take it. Her mother didn't want her to take it. They wanted to go to trial because they were convinced a jury would sympathize with a young woman who sold some old comics to pay for her wedding. Her defense attorney, to his credit, explained very clearly that a jury would hear that she'd been explicitly warned not to touch the property, that she'd memorized the safe combination through observation, that she'd sold $120,000 worth of documented and insured items for $4,200 and deposited the money in her own account, and that she'd shipped stolen property across state lines. He told them a conviction at trial would almost certainly mean prison time. Not years, probably, but months. Real months in a real federal facility. She took the plea. Guilty plea to a federal charge. 2 years of probation. She's a convicted felon now. That means she can't vote in most elections until her probation is complete. It means every job application for the rest of her life that asks about criminal history gets a yes. It means her career in event coordination at a hotel chain, an industry that runs background checks, is functionally over. She was terminated 2 weeks after the plea became public record. Not because of scandal, just because the background check process for an upcoming promotion flagged the conviction. HR reviewed it, and company policy did the rest. The restitution order required her to pay the $4,200 back to the buyer, which her mother had already covered, plus $3,800 in costs I'd incurred for legal fees, reappraisal, and insurance adjustment. Total restitution, $8,000. Her mother paid that too. Her mother, by the end of all of this, had spent approximately $27,000 on her daughter's decision to sell just paper. The venue deposit, $4,800, was non-refundable, and went to a wedding that would never happen. The federal defense retainer, $15,000. The buyer reimbursement, $4,200. The restitution to me, $3,800. That's not counting whatever the DUI lawyer charged for the 2 weeks before he withdrew. The civil suit settled before trial. Her attorney knew the counterclaim was dead and the main claim was strong. They offered a structured settlement, $6,500 paid over 18 months. My attorney advised me to take it because collecting a judgment from someone who just lost their job was going to be harder than negotiating a voluntary payment. I took it. It doesn't come close to covering the stress, the time, or the hole in my gut when I came home to an empty safe. But it's something. My comics came back. I picked them up from the FBI field office on a Wednesday afternoon. A federal agent handed me a cardboard box, and I carried it to my car and sat in the parking lot for about 15 minutes without opening it. When I did open it, everything was there. 12 slabs, 12 CGC cases. Action Comics #1, still in its holder, the Superman cover looking up at me through the acrylic. My uncle's book. The one he bought at a flea market in 1974 for $8 because the guy selling it didn't know what he had. The irony of that, my uncle getting it for nothing because the seller didn't know the value, and my fiancée selling it for nothing because she didn't know the value, wasn't lost on me. History repeating itself 60 years apart. Except this time the person who didn't know was supposed to be someone who loved me. One book had a minor issue. The Amazing Fantasy #15 slab had a hairline crack in the case from being stored improperly at the buyer's location. The comic inside was fine. CGC cases are designed to protect the book even if the case is damaged, but I need to send it to CGC for a reholder. That costs $25 and takes about 3 weeks. Not the end of the world. The rest were perfect, untouched, like they'd never left. I brought them home, opened the safe, put them back, closed the safe, changed the combination. Then I sat in my office chair and just breathed for a while. Here's where I am. The safe is full again. The collection is home. I've upgraded the safe to a digital keypad model with no observable combination. $1,200, non-negotiable expense. I also installed a camera in my office that records to a cloud server. Not because I'm paranoid about my current situation, because I learned that trust without precaution is just vulnerability with better marketing. My ex moved back in with her parents. No job. Federal conviction on her record. 2 years of probation that includes regular check-ins with a federal probation officer. $6,500 in civil settlement payments she'll be making from whatever income she manages to find. Her event coordination career is effectively done. The hospitality industry is small and interconnected, and a felony conviction travels fast. Do I feel good about it? Not exactly. I feel correct. There's a difference. Feeling good implies satisfaction. I don't feel satisfied. I feel like I did what I had to do, and it worked, and now I'm tired. A woman I was going to marry is a felon because she couldn't accept that no meant no. Her mother is out $27,000 because she raised a daughter who thought entitlement was the same as ownership. Her father is a decent man who's watching his family deal with consequences he had no part in creating. And I'm a guy sitting in his office at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, looking at a safe full of old comics that smell like my uncle's house, wondering if any of this was avoidable. It was. She could have not done it. That's the whole avoidable part. She chose to do it, and every consequence that followed was a domino she set up herself. My uncle had this saying. He'd hold up a comic, some beat-up Golden Age book with a torn cover and missing pages, and say, "People look at this and see damage. I look at it and see survival. This thing made it 80 years. Show some respect." That's how I feel about the collection now. It made it through this. Survived a woman who looked at something irreplaceable and saw nothing but paper. The safe is closed. The combination is changed. The comics are home. I'm going to go to bed.